If you connected with this story, I'd love to know. Where in the world are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories are reaching. Your voice matters here, and if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss tomorrow's episode. It's a powerful follow-up, raw, emotional, and full of unexpected truth. Same time, same place. I'll be right here, sharing more stories that deserve to be heard. I hadn't been home in over a year. Not since the last awkward Thanksgiving, when I left early after Denise made a passive-aggressive comment about my freelance lifestyle in front of the entire family. So when my dad, Thomas, turned 60, I figured maybe it was time to show up again. Just one night. One dinner. I booked a flight from Denver, rented a small Airbnb downtown, and promised myself I could leave early if things got weird. The dinner was set at an upscale spot in Portland, one of those places with Edison bulbs, moss-covered walls, and $18 cocktails. Our group filled most of the private dining room. Denise had picked the place, of course. She always liked appearances. I showed up 10 minutes late and took a seat at the far end of the table next to Kayla, her daughter. We weren't close. Never had been. But that night she seemed different. Quieter, almost nervous. She smiled at me like she meant it. I smiled. Back. Halfway through the meal, I got up to use the restroom. On my way back, I swerved slightly to avoid a waiter with a full tray and accidentally brushed the back of Denise's chair. Not hard, not enough to spill her drink. Just a light bump, barely anything. But she turned. Her expression shifted so fast, I barely had time to process it. She looked at me, eyes cold, and slapped me. Hard. The kind of slap that echoes, the kind you don't forget. The room went dead silent. Forks paused midair. Conversations died mid-sentence. All I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears, and then she leaned in, low, venom in her voice. "You're just like your mother." That was it. No apology, no pretense, just that sentence. Loaded. Cruel. I didn't say anything. I just turned to look at my father. Thomas. The man who raised me. The man I thought might finally speak up. He didn't. He stared into his mashed potatoes like they were the most fascinating thing in the room. Like if he focused hard enough, the whole moment would vanish. I waited. Nothing. Not a word, not a glance. Not even a shift in posture to acknowledge what had just happened. So I left. No dramatic exit. No slammed door. I just walked out, got in my rental car, drove back to the Airbnb, sat on the edge of the bed, still in my coat, and stared at the floor. The city hummed around me, traffic, sirens, nightlife, but I heard none of it. That slap wasn't just about dinner. It wasn't even about Denise. It was the final blow in a long, slow unraveling. A reminder that for years I'd been quietly cast as the problem, the angry daughter, the one who never got over it. But something inside me shifted that night. And for the first time, I didn't bury it. I wrote, and everything changed. Back in my Airbnb, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even take off my coat. I sat there on the edge of the bed for what felt like an hour, staring at the floor, feeling like someone had flipped a switch inside me. But it wasn't anger. It was clarity. Cold, sharp clarity. For years, I'd tried to make peace with my family by staying silent, letting things slide, shrinking myself to avoid the conflict Denise seemed to thrive on. But the slap, that slap, in a crowded restaurant, in front of strangers, in front of my father, made one thing clear. Silence had never kept the peace. It had only protected the lie, so I opened my laptop. At first, I was just venting. I didn't plan anything. It wasn't a strategy, just me typing out what had happened. But the more I wrote, the more I realized how much I'd swallowed over. The years, the gaslighting, the manipulation, the way my dad let Denise rewrite our family's story, one quiet compromise at a time. I posted it on a subreddit I'd followed for years, R Raised by Narcissists. I changed the names, left out some dates, but I told the truth. The slap, the dinner, the years of emotional fog that followed my mom's death. I didn't expect much, maybe a few comments, a little validation from strangers who'd been through something similar. Instead, the post exploded. Thousands of upvotes, hundreds of comments. People saying, "You're not crazy. I lived through this too. Thank you for sharing." Some of them messaged me privately. Some shared their own stories. It was overwhelming and strangely healing. For the first time, I didn't feel alone. For the first time, I felt heard. And then, I got a message that stopped me cold. Kayla. She messaged me privately. It was short. "Rachel, I know it's you. I read your post, and I believe everything. Can we talk?" I stared at the screen, heart pounding. Kayla and I had never been close. We'd been pitted against each other our whole lives. She was the good daughter, the polished one, Denise's pride. I was the problem, the stubborn one, the one who left. But something about that message felt real and brave. So I responded. We met the next morning at a tiny coffee shop just off Hawthorne Boulevard. I showed up first, nervous, hands shaking around my cup. But when Kayla walked in, she didn't look like the girl I remembered. No makeup, hoodie, hair, tied back. No Denise polish, just a tired woman who looked like she hadn't slept in days. And then she said, "I've always known something wasn't right." What followed was something I never expected. Honesty. From both of us. Shared. Memories. Shared silence. And eventually, shared resolve. What Denise had built was a house of lies, and together, we were finally ready to knock it down. Kayla and I didn't make a plan that morning over coffee. We made a decision. No more hiding, no more pretending. That night, while our father and Denise were still at the restaurant, probably replaying their own version of events, we were already at the house. We let ourselves in with the spare key Dad always kept under the ceramic turtle in the flower bed. The house was exactly as I remembered it. Cold, quiet, spotless, staged. Just like Denise liked it. We sat in the living room, the lights dimmed, the folder sitting in plain sight on the coffee table. Inside, it was everything. Photos, screenshots, letters, proof. Years of evidence I'd quietly collected and stored in an old Dropbox folder I'd forgotten about. Until now. Kayla brought her own receipts, text messages, voice memos. One from 2 years ago, where Denise called me an ungrateful ghost of a girl, told Kayla I would never stop being a problem until Dad finally saw me for what I was. And then there were the letters, the ones my mom wrote in the last months of her life. One of them, tucked inside the jewelry box I'd found after the funeral, said, "She's already trying to fill my place. I know you see it, even if you're afraid to admit it." We heard the car pull into the driveway around 9 p.m. Doors closed, laughter, keys in the lock. Then, silence. Dad stepped in first, holding his jacket over one arm. Denise was mid-sentence, probably still talking about the wine list or the dessert she didn't finish. But when they saw us, Kayla on one side of the room, me on the other, and the folder between us, everything froze. The air changed. Dad paused in the entryway, his eyes darting to the folder, to my face, back to Kayla. He didn't say anything, just stood there like his body hadn't caught up with what his brain was processing. "Denise?" She froze for half a second, just long enough to show she hadn't expected this. Then the mask went back on. "What is this?" she asked. Kayla answered, her voice steady but cold. "It's time for the truth." Dad sat down slowly. He opened the folder like it was radioactive. The first page was the Reddit post, names changed, of course, but the words were mine. All of it. What had happened that night. What had been happening for years. As he read, his face changed color. Pink, then pale, then gray. Denise hovered behind him, arms crossed, silent, until she saw the text messages. Then it started. "This is absurd," she snapped. "She's manipulating you. She's always been dramatic, trying to turn you against me." But Kayla cut in. She didn't slap herself. That was it. The line that cracked the foundation. Dad kept flipping through the evidence, silent. Denise kept lashing out, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one defending myself. I was just watching the truth finally speak louder than her lies. The confrontation didn't end with shouting or slammed doors. Denise didn't operate like that. She wasn't the type to throw a tantrum. She played a longer game, one that unfolded behind closed doors, in legalese and carefully worded emails. A week after the folder hit the table, a letter arrived. Certified mail. From Denise's attorney. She was filing for legal separation and demanding full ownership of the house. The same house my mother had chosen, the house my mom had paid for, over 70% of the down payment, with money from her father's inheritance. Denise also wanted spousal support and, bizarrely, claimed that a box of antique teacups, my great-grandmother's passed down to my mom, had been gifted to her before her passing. I laughed out loud reading it. It was so ridiculous, I almost admired the audacity. Almost. She's trying to gaslight you through legal paperwork, I told my dad over the phone. But he wasn't laughing. He sounded like a man slowly waking, up from a 15-year coma, groggy, disoriented, horrified by how far things had gone. That night, we met with a lawyer, Samira, one of Kayla's friends. Sharp, fearless, and absolutely no nonsense. The kind of woman who didn't blink when we laid out everything. The texts, the screenshots, the letters, the Reddit post. The list of heirlooms my mom had written out, one of which clearly stated, Rachel receives the teacup set upon her 30th birthday. I hate to say this, Samira said after skimming through Denise's demands. But this is going to be fun. Turns out Denise had made a classic mistake. She'd never been legally added to the deed on the house. My dad had bought it before they got married and never updated the paperwork. She assumed 15 years of marriage automatically entitled her to half. She was wrong. The house was 100% his and potentially part of my mother's estate. As for the spousal support, Samira smiled and said, Good luck convincing a judge after what we're about to submit. We didn't tell Denise any of this ahead of time. We waited for mediation. She walked in wearing a beige power suit, flanked by a fresh-faced lawyer who looked like he'd just passed the bar. Her smugness was almost impressive, until Samira dropped the first bomb, proof of sole home ownership. Then the second, my mother's estate list. Then the third, the therapist's note verifying emotional trauma triggered by the dinner incident. Finally, Samira slid the Reddit post across the table, labeled with a calm, "For the record." Denise's face fell slowly, like a tower collapsing in slow motion. Her hands clenched. Her lawyer whispered something, trying to contain the damage. Then Samira delivered the final offer. No spousal support, no property, no heirlooms. Walk away quietly, or we file counterclaims for emotional abuse, interference with estate assets, and intentional infliction of distress. Your choice. Denise didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just nodded, eyes burning. It was over, and this time, she didn't get to rewrite the ending. After mediation, Denise vanished. Not literally, of course, but from our lives completely. She moved into a condo across town, the one she used to call too small for someone of her lifestyle. We didn't hear from her, not directly. She tried reaching out to some relatives to spin her version of the story, but too many people had seen the truth laid bare. And without control, Denise had no power. The silence she left behind wasn't protective anymore. It was empty, and in that emptiness, something started to shift. My dad, Thomas, began therapy. Voluntarily, no pushing, no suggestion, just action. He called me once a week, sometimes twice. Not about Denise, not about guilt, just to talk. Sometimes he shared memories of my mom, things I'd never heard him say out loud, like how she always hummed when doing laundry, or how she made grilled cheese with mayonnaise instead of butter and refused to explain why. It was awkward at first, sure, but it felt real, honest. Kayla and I, somehow, grew close. Closer than we'd ever been under the same roof as teenagers. We weren't rivals anymore. We were something else. Survivors of the same long, manipulative war neither of us fully understood at the time. One weekend, we took a drive to the Oregon coast, Cannon Beach. It's where my mom had taken me when I was a kid. We brought sandwiches, old photo boxes, and a blanket we found in the basement. It smelled like cedar and something I couldn't quite name, maybe memory. We talked for hours, laughed, sat in silence, and cried when we needed to. When we got home, Dad had cleaned out the garage. He found the album my mom made the summer before she passed. Every page had captions in her neat, looping handwriting. Rachel's first tide pool. Thomas's sunburn, round 2. So much laughter today. I hope it sticks. He read that one out loud, then closed the book and said, I think I forgot who I was when she died. And I let Denise fill the space without asking why. Didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Weeks passed. The house got quieter in a better way. Kayla returned to work. I stayed in Portland longer than planned, working remotely and helping Dad sort through the chaos Denise had left behind. The rooms felt lighter, the air easier to breathe. And then, one afternoon, he handed me a single sheet of paper. It was a deed transfer. 50% of the house. Signed over to me. It's what your mother would have wanted, he said. And what I should have done a long time ago. We didn't celebrate. No champagne, no big announcements. We just had tea, out of my mom's teacups, the ones Denise had tried to claim. And as I wrapped my hands around the warm porcelain, I realized this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming what should have never been taken in the first place. If this story touched something deep in you, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been in a room where the silence was louder than the injustice? Have you ever walked away from a family that didn't see you, only to return stronger, clearer, and ready to speak your truth? I know these stories aren't always easy to share, but your voice matters here. Drop a comment below and tell me where in the world you're watching from. Whether you're in a small town or a big city, whether this story reminds you of your own or simply moved you in a way you didn't expect, your words help keep this space honest, raw, and real. And if you haven't yet, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. We share stories like this every week. Stories of healing, betrayal, justice, and quiet strength. Tomorrow's story is another powerful one, and you won't want to miss it. Same time, same place. I'll be here, sharing stories that deserve to be heard. So go ahead, speak your truth in the comments. Because sometimes healing starts with being seen.